interesting set of discussions. Identity, money, fintech, health. So what else is left? Getting items, things from point A to B. We all need various set of things in a day, right from a kg of rice to booking a movie ticket or booking a plane flight ticket or something, right? And it's all of e-commerce, right? Which is something which has revolutionized the way we shop. Moving away from stores, physical marts, now we buy stuff online, we book stuff online, we move things online and digitally. And that is where we come to our next panel, which is going to talk about ONDC, which is where it has revolutionized. And what we are going to learn about is how does ONDC today stand in India, what has happened, and how does it pave the way for a global e-commerce platform. Again, we have a beautiful panel on this one, very, very interesting profiles and very senior leadership. Joining us right from ONDC is Mr. Harishankar. Okay, Harishankar is Head of Transformation at the Open Network for Digital Commerce. In his role, he is working on the large-scale value chain transformation opportunities on the network across sectors with industry leaders, government bodies, and network participants. Most of it has been a solution to the MSME community, and he has been a CPG industry professional with rich experience in digital transformation, enterprise, and business operations. He started his career with Hindustan Unilever and did a number of roles in IT as well as supply chain and business strategy. He was the CIO of HUL, leading all aspects of IT. And finally, he has led enterprise applications globally for Unilever and a number of global technology leadership roles. In his last role, he was leading the global digital core transformation for Kimberly-Clark. He's a BTech from IT Bombay and an MBA from IIM Bangalore. Mr. Harishankar, can you please have you on stage, sir? Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause. Next in line is the founder and CEO of Plotch AI, one of the largest rails for ONDC infrastructure in the country. Prior to Plotch, Manoj has founded Craftsvilla, which is India's largest online marketplace for ethnic products. In earlier days, he was a principal at Nexus Venture Partners, a $1 billion venture fund, where he invested in multiple e-commerce companies in India. He's another alumnus from IT Bombay and passed out of IIM Ahmedabad, and additionally University of California, San Diego, and University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Can we have on stage Mr. Manoj? Moving on next, our another panelist comes from the banking side. He's a veteran in transactions, corporate and commercial bank covering large, mid and small corporates based out of India and their subs located across US, Europe and Asian markets. He has been their client's main point of contact on transaction banking, advisory, across cash management, trade finance and trade services, but consistently building a deep understanding of their business objectives to elevate their experience across the value chain. This is Mr. Indranil Saha from DBS Bank India. Can we have your place, sir? Moving on next, all about ONDC, which we talk about his infrastructure, products, moving left and right. But end of the day is the delivery bitch and the guy who shows up at your door bringing the stuff which makes you happy. For that, we are going to cover our dear guest from Shadowfax. He's an IT Delhi 2012 graduate, a founding team member, and the head of Hyperlocal operations at Shadowfax. He works closely with ONDC to build the logistic infrastructure for intra-city operations. Can we have on stage Mr. Ashish Kumar Singh? Finally, moderating this panel is our very own Ms. Neha Mittal. She leads Digital Natives team at Microsoft India. She has been in Microsoft for over 7 years and works closely with startups across Fintechs, B2C and B2B. She's a pass out of IT Delhi and an MBA from ISB. She had led a successful exit of a startup in the semiconductor business in this space before joining Microsoft and has been a consultant at McKinsey as well. She'll be leading our panel and moderating this session for the next 45 minutes. Can we have on stage with a round of applause for Ms. Neha Mittal.
Thank you, Saurabh, for that introduction, and thanks to all the panelists for being here. I would love to get started. The introduction is already done, but just double-clicking on that, especially as part of your current portfolios. So, Hari, I'll start with you in terms of just laying the baseline on what is ONDC.
Thanks, Neha. So, Open Network for Digital Commerce, ONDC, is really an endeavor from the government, from the industry, and frankly from the whole ecosystem to look at how can we expand the footprint of digital commerce in the country. Right? If you look at where we stand today, the overall penetration of digital commerce is about 6 to 8%. Now, all of us in urban, particularly Bangalore, obviously for us it's a much bigger share. But if you take the country as a whole, we're probably about 6 to 8%, and it's very different across sectors, right? There could be some sectors like travel and air booking, etc., where it could be 80, 90%. But then if you look at things like grocery, it's probably 4 or 5%, right? So clearly there is a huge opportunity, and if you look at where we are versus what is there in the West, and frankly even China, Southeast Asia, etc., there's a huge opportunity. But more than just the expansion of digital commerce, it is also about how it expands. How does it expand in a manner which is more inclusive, which kind of takes the whole industry along? It's not just looking at the top end of the industry or the top end of consumers. And therefore the endeavor is about how do we do this in a more democratized manner, which is where the whole open network comes in. So this is really, ONDC is a not-for-profit institution. We roll up to the Ministry of Commerce, but it is a private sector undertaking with the investment from a lot of banks and financial institutions, with the endeavor of driving digital commerce in this kind of open network manner.
Thanks, Hari, for that. You talked about the how of it, and there the enablers and therefore the ecosystem comes in. So I would also love the other panelists, starting with you, Manoj, from a Plotch perspective. How is Plotch enabling ONDC as a platform, and how do you see that evolving?
Sure, Neha. So basically, Plotch.ai, we are the largest ONDC Rails infrastructure company. Now let me expand on that a little bit to tell you, what that means. So ONDC is a network. It is not a platform. First thing that whenever I speak, I tell it's a network. It's not a platform, and so therefore it has a very different behavior. How you stitch your customer experience and seller experience in a network environment is a little bit different from how you will stitch, in a platform environment, right? Now, any network you see, and you might see a network here, and you might see a mobile, network. Now, you need infrastructure. You need infrastructure so that you can set up that network, right? Now, in your home, you might have a router, right? A router connects you that to the internet, right? Mobile networks, you have 30 towers, who is a setup kind of stuff, right? So, primarily, 2 years back when we heard about ONDC as a network, we realized that there's going to be a lot of network infrastructure which will be needed, which will allow any one of you to become part of the ONDC network very, very quickly, right? So that's basically is what we do. We are enabler in ONDC. We provide pre-built infrastructure so that you don't have to worry about technology if you want to join. And that's basically the primary role. I'm happy to expand on it more, but I'll leave it to others. Yeah.
Thank you, Manoj. We'll definitely come back to you. Indranil, enabling obviously requires payments as a backbone and banks as a backbone. How do you see ONDC benefiting banks and vice versa? What is the contribution you think you have in terms of just building the ecosystem?
Okay, so I will come to the bank piece, but let me take a step back, Neha, and address a few things in terms of numbers to set the context. E-commerce market, broad approximation, is today around $50 billion. By around 2026, expectation is that, $83 billion. By around 2026, expectation is that it will go to around $150 billion. That's what we are talking from an India perspective. If you look at this entire story, largely 4 to 5 major e-commerce players, mostly foreigners, capture large section of that market. Huge problem is in terms of digitalizing the retailers, the kirana stores, people who are there in tier 2, 3 town cities and villages. That's where ONDC comes in. Today we are talking about through the ONDC network, we are talking about digitalizing commerce, but very soon, and it's already happened, all kinds of transactions have started happening through the ONDC platform. Very recently, banks have started selling their products to the ONDC platform. But we as a bank, and not only us, let's talk about what lot of banks are trying to do and solve for. This is a place where multiple partners, multiple players, multiple stakeholders have joined hands to serve a common goal, to serve the customer's requirements. There are sellers through the seller app, there are buyers through the buyer app, logistics players who are taking care of delivery, dispute resolution framework, TSP for RSP for reconciliation services, and so on and so forth. And then of course the banking network to take care of your payment collections and so on and so forth. So of course, for the entire commerce to happen, you have to have rails for payment and collections, and banks are contributing to that. But more importantly, banks are trying to figure out a way to finance those small sellers, which was earlier not there. And why banks are able to do that today? Because of the data which is there in the platform, which can be leveraged to form financial or to take financial decisions. So I would say this is one drastic change which has happened. Database lending was there. A lot of fintechs, a lot of banks have adopted database lending. But again, it was the recipient of those loans were typically larger or medium corporates. Now it has enabled us to look at those small and medium enterprises in tier 2, 3 town cities and villages, and make finance available for them.
Thanks for that, Indranil. I think you raised an important point around lending and bringing more of India into the fold because of the data that you're able to collect through transactions. Thanks for that. I think we'll touch more on that, but just following through with the introductions, Ashish, delivery and the last mile logistics is such an important part of any e-commerce platform or network in this case. So how do you see, how would you differentiate? So there are lots of logistics players on the platform. What is it that a logistics platform can do to differentiate, because there is a choice available on ONDC?
Thanks. Thank you. I think as I talk about what is the value which Shadowfax as a company brings in, as of now, Shadowfax, if I just give you an idea, as of now we are one of the largest logistics player, covering roughly around 17,000 pin codes of India. And what it means in terms of number of cities, we are present in almost 2,200 odd cities. So that is something that we bring a value on the ONDC network when we come in. That one is with respect to the serviceability and coverage that we can bring in. That's something where we have worked very closely with ONDC in terms of enabling the logistics across a lot of these pin codes and cities. That is something that is one. The second part is basically with respect to the cost that we have been able to bring in. Of course, when a lot of these e-commerce platforms and then say the food aggregator platforms started in India, they operated at a certain cost, which was something which was not sustainable. What we have initiated or what we have done from day one on the ONDC platform is that, being the cost leader in the market, we have ensured that the cost goodness is something that is passed on to the platform, and that is something which enables the merchants to deliver to as many customers as possible. So that is the second part. The third is also on the speed piece. And when I talk about speed, of course, when it comes to the e-commerce platform, there is a larger thought process in terms of how can we deliver as fast as possible. Earlier, it used to be delivered in a 2-day. Can we deliver it in the same day kind of a delivery? Say the pin code which were covered in the 3-4 days, can we bring it to a 2 days something? That is something that we are also working very closely with ONDC to bring in the speed part of it. So I would say in terms of the serviceability and coverage, speed and the cost are the three value adds that we are looking to bring in on the platform with our technology that we have been able to build.
Great. Thanks for that, Ashish. Just going back to you, Hari, just wanted to expand the scope of the discussion by first laying out what is the aim, right? So you talked a little bit about that, but just double clicking. What is it that ONDC hopes to achieve, let's say, in the next 1 year, both in terms of transactions or other goals that you have, and where are we in that journey right now?
Sure, Neha. So, what is our aim? Like I said, one is about expanding the footprint of digital commerce. But more than the numerical expansion, it is about the quality and the shape of e-commerce, right? So one of the things which we are really focused on and really as part of transformation within ONDC is how do we look at the currently undigitized sellers, undigitized producers, and also consumers who are outside of digital commerce today, right? Because otherwise, by sheer economics, you have enterprises which are really focused on just the top end of it, right? And of course, in the top end, and all of us are part of that, right? That is growing, but and we are focused on that segment as well. But I think it requires a significant amount of effort and innovative thinking on what can we do for undigitized sellers, undigitized producers, and consumers who are outside of this. And that, frankly, both from a larger economic perspective and also from a social perspective, becomes very critical. So I'll give some examples, right? For example, we have been looking at artisans and weavers, right? Now, today, some of them do sell online, but it's still, either through intermediaries or still it's really a very small base of them. Because there is no organized mechanism to get them onto e-commerce in a big way. Whereas there is a big market in urban India for many of these products. So we are saying, can we work closely with them? And there is huge support coming in from the government, from development institutions to make sure that we make that happen. So that's really in the kind of small artisans category. Working with small and medium enterprises, right? And world over is a phenomenon that when digital commerce comes in, the bigger players everywhere, right? Bigger enterprises, the bigger e-commerce platforms, we obviously prosper well. And it is these smaller companies which, many of them kind of tend to lose out, right? And that's not good for the economy, and that's not good for livelihoods. So how can we particularly work with the MSME sector, right? And again, there is a huge support coming in from the Ministry of MSME, from development institutions, from philanthropic organizations. And as ONDC, we want to catalyze all of that to say, what could we do? Now, again, I'm kind of talking more about this sector. We are obviously very much focused on, the e-commerce play of today. But this is a clearly an added play that we are focusing on.
I'm going to be a little disruptive to get more energy going here. So, of course, Manoj, you used to, I think you still run Crafts Villa. So I just want to also understand, how does a e-com player today, especially the large ones, the big platforms, look at ONDC, and is that a threat? Because that is a common question that comes across. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's an interesting question. Yeah. Primarily, if you look at ONDC is a democratic network. It's for everyone. I don't think it's a threat for anyone. And I speak to so many large marketplaces. Large e-commerce companies. They are looking. Of course, they started. What is this? How does it work? What is it in for me, and those kind of stuff, right? Slowly, as they started to look into this, right, they started to realize that it is much more than what they imagined, right? Now, ONDC today, at least when I see it, it's a collection of networks. It is not just a single network. It's a network of e-commerce, a network of fintech, it's a network of logistics, it's a network of mobility, and a lot of other things which will come in future, right? So when an e-commerce company comes in the e-commerce, network, there's a fintech network which is also very interesting for them. Suddenly, they start to realize that they get so much traffic, they can actually start selling insurances, for example, or they can start doing mobility, offer mobility like rides and not rides, without doing anything, because the other side is already there, right? So these are the realizations which a lot of these large marketplaces and large e-commerce companies are making. Of course, for their own category where they have strength, they may not find it that interesting. Of course, that also is another area where there's so much of supply they can tap into. But that's a separate question. But fundamentally, they are looking at complementary supply, complementary categories, complementary revenue models, complementary business opportunities for them. And ONDC is a great playground arena for that. That's basically is something that I'm seeing.
Great, and it adds to their assortment in terms of just getting a lot more merchants onto their platform as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. Just in terms of how there are 4 blocks, as per my understanding, and correct me. So there's the supplier side, there's the buyer app, there's the payments space and there's the logistics space, right? So across these four, and maybe one by one, each of you can answer this. What are the roadblocks you see today, and any solutions or go forward plans? Maybe with you, we'll start with you, Ashish.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is, while it's a decoupled system, and then of course, while there's a buyer app, there's a seller app, and there's a logistics and fintech, everybody is an expertise, and they bring in their own expertise. I think the first thing wherein each of these platforms, how do they talk to each other, and how is that synergy build is something that also, while the expertise comes in, of course there's a larger challenge also in terms of how is that synergy built in across all these platforms. That is the one thing. The other part is also in terms of the investment that each of these platforms looks to build in. Means while one of these can look to go aggressive, the other is something wherein it's not something which is there's a coordination that is there, or the aggressiveness that is not there. It also adds to the overall growth or the momentum that is brought on the platform. So that is broadly, that is one major challenge, wherein when with all the larger e-commerce or the aggregators platform, there is one unit that operates, and there is always that coordination that is there. So that is the one thing. The other part is when we look at the experience that we are looking to create on the platform. So of course there are larger touch points wherein say there is a buyer app which is there. The customer comes in, the customer is looking for a particular product or a particular restaurant, for example, to order from. But say the seller app is not able to bring in that seller, or that seller is still not registered. So basically that is something that goes missing. Or say the overall experience wherein say a product gets damaged or something, who takes the accountability and responsibility of it. I think that is the larger essence. That is something that will, of course, the platform is maturing as we proceed, but that's something that is still in the learning phase, I would say.
Thanks, Ashish. I think especially the last one, to me at least, seems like a very big white space right now. Any thoughts from other panelists on the roadblocks, and also any solutions that you think can be offered here?
See, I think to me it's a wonderful system which is built. The underlying ethos is transparency, right? There is a dispute resolution framework which is already built in. Yes, their challenge is that the dispute resolution framework rests not with one entity, but it can be anybody. It is clearly defined that when you need to approach a buyer app, what are the roles and responsibilities of a seller app, and so on and so forth. However, from a consumer perspective, right, we always try to catch hold of one person, and that should be the central point of contact to resolve all my queries, which perhaps is a little difficult thing to do under the ONDC framework, because multiple stakeholders have multiple objectives, multiple KRAs, multiple ways of doing their work. But I firmly believe that if this happens, okay, and before that, democratization also has its own challenges, right? We all know that if China wants to set up a road network of 100 kilometers, they can do that in a jiffy, which is not very easy in India because of lot of reasons that all of us are aware of. Having said which, I firmly believe that if it can happen in one place, that is this country, because if the network rules and regulations are followed by all stakeholders, it will take time, but over a period of time, I'm sure will mature enough to make it a coherent whole.
Yeah, no, basically we say that, we see a lot of action. We have 20 large clients right now. So we see a lot of action. So we are well aware of, the challenges in ONDC network. But let's face it, Rome was not built in a day. So, this is a great story. I personally, whenever I, think about ONDC, just get very excited. Even though I've been, in ONDC network for last, 2 years. It's a revolution. It's a large digital transformation which is happening. It's never been done anywhere in the world. It's an Indian innovation, right? So that's basically so exciting that we are building something which is so unique, and the opportunities that it is unlocking is also just immense. I have been in e-commerce industry for last 15 years, and we were there. Then I've seen so many players come. The recipe hasn't changed. because the recipe hasn't changed, the outcomes are still the same. The same burn, same kind of unit economics and those kind of stuff. ONDC is a fundamental recipe change in e-commerce, which gives me confidence that today, we can think of a profitable e-commerce company in ONDC network, right? So that's basically is very exciting for me. I also feel that AI will play a big role in ONDC. Of course, AI is the most used word, and I don't want to use it a lot, but fundamentally, I see AI playing a lot of big role to basically bring buyers and sellers of small towns and rural India who speak local language should be able to transact very seamlessly, because UPI with QR code did the same thing, and fundamentally that what is the QR code of ONDC, it still needs to be cracked, but I think fundamentally it will come from AI. So yeah, a lot of roadblocks, but very exciting, at least what I see.
Yeah, Manoj, in fact, what you said is very profound on what it means for how e-commerce has evolved in the past and how we see it going forward, right? I've just add one more thing, there are obviously a number of challenges, right? And most of the challenges are around when something goes wrong, how do we solve it, right? Which definitely will solve it, right? I mean, those are, problem solving is always been the strength of everybody in this sector. We'll solve for it. To me, the biggest challenge or opportunity is about how do we tap the upside which this kind of unlocks, right? And what do I mean by that? We talked about small sellers, small producers, etc. That's one side of it. But particularly if you look at the innovation ecosystem, and I know many in this audience are part of that innovation ecosystem. In a more platform-centric world of digital commerce, what happens is 80-90% of the heavy lifting is happening inside the platform. That means any of the innovation which is happening happening on the periphery, right? And obviously there's a lot of valuable innovation happening, but it's still confined to the 10-20% which is outside of the platform. In an ONDC world, there is no core, right? Everyone it's a completely flat network when everyone can innovate. And therefore the opportunity it unlocks for everyone, particularly the innovation and startup ecosystem, to be a participant on the core is that much bigger. And in some ways, it's also a challenge because we are dependent on the innovation ecosystem to solve our problems, right? And when I contrast this with my earlier job, when I was doing digital transformation at a global enterprise level, you have all the levers under your control, right? So whatever you want to do, you assemble a team and you got the money, you do whatever it wants to fix it, right? But in this case, you can see an opportunity, but you are not in control of it, right? You are dependent on the ecosystem, which actually can be an exponential multiplier, right? Because at the same time, you're not constrained by your own resources. How do we creatively tap into the ecosystem, right? And and it's great that we have fantastic partners like Manoj, what Ashish you are doing. How do we leverage the power of the ecosystem to deliver to this objective? To me, it's a fundamental change in our mindset. All of us are used to kind of solving in our own domains, but it's about looking outside to solve the problem.
No, thanks for that. I think all of you alluded to a few thematics, if I may summarize. So there was something around, of course, huge opportunity, but the fact that there are many players involved, there is also a little bit of coordination, ownership. Let's say if there's a failed order, for example, how does that flow in terms of ownership, right? And how does that get resolved across multiple parties? So I heard that there's also this thing about being able to reach a lot more sellers, but how do we get the ensure quality of service? So on that, just wanted, I know you say you said that this is something that many brains are working on, but is there like a central protocol that will be created, or how are we thinking, just to double click on that in terms of the solution space here?
Yeah. So you're right, Neha. So there are obviously certain things which has to be done centrally. So what is it? Obviously managing the protocol is central. A lot of the evangelism which is required in the initial stage is being driven, I would say centrally, but obviously there's a lot of central sponsorship to make it happen. Because if you just leave it to the ecosystem, chances are some of these really heavy lifting, which requires working with enterprises, working with development institutions, with the government, I mean, that won't happen by itself, right? For example, some of the big hackathons that we are running, right, with large, support from large players, right? A lot of that happens because we are able to centrally tap into them. But we do that with the recognition and the humility that we are not going to be solving the problem. We are just a catalyst. So I would say we are in this kind of almost bifocal world where we believe we are the catalyst. We have to provide some thought leadership. We have to provide the connects. but really the heavy lifting as well as the innovation is going to happen from the ecosystem. So that's really this bifocal approach that we have been adopting.
So Neha, if I may add, so look, the framework is there, right? So if I as a customer is having a problem, I can reach out to the buyer app, and the buyer app is responsible to solve that problem for me. The buyer app in turn can actually choose the seller app from where they can do. The logistics players can be chosen. It can be chosen by the customer. So there are multiple ways, right? Let's take logistics as an example. The seller app can have their own logistics. The buyer app can have their own logistics player. There can be a 3PL player like Shadowfax who can offer logistics services. ONDC can have their own logistics players. So to Manoj's point, one can use machine language to choose one of those players in terms of who offered the better service, who offered service at a cheaper cost, turnaround time, and so on and so forth. So the framework is available, it is clearly defined, but implementation of that framework requires a lot of coordination and aligned objective. The moment we solve that, or we approach that, I think we are home. And one more thing that I would like to just point out is that, so typically any network or platform, internet for example, is a function of how many stakeholders, how many participants are there in the platform. And that is something which is very interesting. We are seeing light at the end of the tunnel. I see ITC, Coke, large companies, large FMCG companies coming in the ONDC portal. A lot of e-commerce companies are coming here in this in the ONDC network, and very soon, hopefully, a lot of other kinds of companies will also come in.
Any other thoughts on this topic? Otherwise, I had one more question for all of you to answer, but I'll just quickly check. Ashish, Manoj, anything to add to how that central orchestration should be done?
I'll just quickly add. I think, see, e-commerce, we have been in e-commerce business before. E-commerce has always been a multi-party business, we always had a Razorpay as a payment gateway, Shadowfax as a, logistics company, some technology provider like Magento, Shopify, and then, the sellers are there. It's just that the platform is split into buyer app and seller app, so there's one more party has been added, right? So fundamentally, that orchestration, someone, was already happening, someone was doing it. It's just that it's been split in some ways, right? So fundamentally, if you look at it, people of course ask a lot of questions, whose responsibility is, but the responsibility has always been there, it's a Paytm's responsibility for the customer. Is the let's say Snapdeal is on the side, Snapdeal is buying for the seller, right? And the protocol stitches all this together in some way, right? That's how it works. So I think we of course get, a lot of these questions of suddenly but fundamentally customer is seeing the Paytm, so they will go to Paytm. Seller is seeing the Snapdeal, they will go to seller. Anyways, the orchestrations, the Paytm has to talk to Snapdeal, Snapdeal has to talk, because they have been doing that in e-commerce for last 12 years anyways, with someone. So that's the only thing I wanted to add. Yeah.
Thanks, that's super insightful. I had one more question, if I'm allowed. Somebody raised the alarm here, but I wanted to ask about the evangelism piece. I think you touched upon it, Hari, that what is the plan there? Because in these circles, we talk about ONDC a lot in terms of both penetration currently, but also in terms of evangelization. How is that happening, and what more needs to be done? Again, question to all, but maybe I'll start with you, Hari.
So the way we have mapped out, how do we come and evangelize this, right? So one is with the established big enterprises, right? Not really the digital natives, but the big enterprises. And we're getting good traction there. So, we have HUL and ITC and Coke, and, that's really, board level discussions. We are talking at the CEO level, making sure, I think everyone is excited about the fact that this will not only kind of open opportunities for them, but many of the risks they saw is getting addressed. So that's one constituency. The second is with all the development institutions with the support from the government, right? With Ministry of MSME, with organizations like SIDBI, etc. That's one stakeholder. With the innovation ecosystem, right? I think with the large players, how we have been running hackathons, and including engaging with a number of VCs and private equity firms. So it's about, we have mapped out almost like a 360 view of the ecosystem to say, first is about informing. Second, if kind of exciting them about the opportunity, being able to address very pointed questions which they would have, right? I think that process is going really well because we want to make sure that the whole community understands it, believes in it, and supports it.
Thanks.
See, to add to what Harish sir just mentioned, I think look at what happened to UPI. Of course, there is widespread adoption of UPI, but UPI is simple. It's a messaging interface. ONDC is much more complex. But look at the early signs. Proctera has actually taken ONDC outside the country with MAS, right? Singapore Central Bank, and I'm sure it will not only be restricted within the borders of the country. It will definitely go overseas, and it will also help our SME sellers take their products and sell it outside the country at much higher prices, right? So definitely there is a lot of merit in it. Things will have to evolve, challenges will be there, we will have to solve for it, but there is a huge, humongous opportunity.
I'll just quickly add, I think while the large enterprises will for sure help to build the base of the network, I think the larger essence of the network will always come when we are able to enable all these SMEs and to give them an opportunity to create and deliver or say sell to the larger ecosystem in terms of the covering the larger country, and also in fact as mentioned, if you can also sell outside, that is something that will build the larger essence of the network, I think.
Absolutely. I think you touched upon something important, which is the scalability of this across other countries and other geographies, just like UPI, right? So how scalable is this? I presume this can literally become a global phenomenon, or is there things that will be needed to adopt it across different geographies? Anybody on the panel?
Since we work in tech, maybe I can take that. Scalability is, let's look at scalability from multiple angles, right? One is the scalability of the protocol itself, right? Protocol actually is very flexible. It actually can work. It's based on, of course, ONDC network is based on a fundamental backend protocol, and it is a very standardized protocol. It works across multiple categories, multiple use cases, and those kinds of stuff. So from a scalability of category perspective, or those, even location scalability, like if you want to go to other locations outside of the country, different currency, it's very scalable from that perspective. Second thing is, because it is a protocol, it's this API schema and all those things, it is not that you have to do one-on-one integrations and those kind of stuff. So network scalability, which means that how is there a blocker in creating a large network from an API perspective? No, because it's based on API. Basically, it's a network protocol. And so that scalability is inherent. Now, whether there are limitations on number of sellers can participate, buyers is concerned. That also, because there are a lot of buyer apps, a lot of seller apps that is there. Data is of course on each of the buyer app, seller app. So data scalability is there. So from a scalability angle, I don't feel any challenges. I think the only thing is, as it scales, the stitching of the customer experience will become more and more complex. So I think that we need to guard against. But yeah, other than that, I don't. Yeah.
Just 10 more seconds. I'm cognizant of the time. Look at the number of companies that have flourished when this happened, right? There are seller apps, buyer apps which are anywhere there. Now there are companies who are evolving, who are giving plug and play network for somebody to become a seller app. There are companies who are coming in, who are playing the role of reconciliation. Banks are thinking, very, very innovative ways to play a part there, diversifying their products. That's one. Second, again coming to numbers, the target that I think, and you would know sir better, the target that they have taken is essentially to take the number of buyers to around 800 million with 1.2 million sellers. 800 million buyers with 1.2 million sellers. And that's not impossible. May not be 2 years, maybe 4 years, 5 years, but that's not an impossible task. That's how I want to leave it.
I think we can go on. This is such an interesting topic. We've just started, and I can see, there's so much more to discuss. But I can just see the innovation. And to your point, there's so much more that players can add and are adding to this, and it will continue to evolve. So it's a space we should all keep watching out for. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Wonderful talking to you and super insightful as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Do we have time for questions or gentleman in the suit, grey suit? Oh, okay, first, yeah.
My name is Jagdish. I don't know if I got the basics a little wrong. I'll take an example. If I'm buying something from Amazon or Big Basket, as a customer, from a customer perspective, if I go to ONDC and buy it, it's going to be cheaper for me? One, that's question number one. Second is the logistics piece. In India, the logistics cost is very high. How does ONDC bring that cost down?
So clearly, price competitiveness is an important factor, and we believe the players today whom we are working with, both on the seller side and the buyer side, are aggressively looking to address that. If you see particularly in food delivery, and there have been some very interesting YouTube videos from some of the big restaurant chains, right? Some very influential restaurateurs who have kind of been in this space, and they're talking about how they have been able to bring down the end consumer cost in their category. So we believe that clearly the level of competition and the support of the ecosystem will kind of get to a better economics for the consumer. So without doubt, that's clearly the thing, and it's purely because how the ecosystem will respond to it. So we already kind of seeing that. Sorry, what was your second question?
Yeah, the logistics cost I heard is pretty high. Does ONDC help address that piece, that the logistics cost comes down?
Yeah. So if you take the logistics cost, and I know Ashish, you are doing a lot in this space, but clearly we are seeing the level of investment which is going in many spaces, particularly hyperlocal, that will automatically increase capacity, and it will get down to the right economic cost. Finally, there is a cost of economics which will play out, right? But clearly we believe again the investment and competition will get that. But maybe you may want to answer.
I think around 2-3 weeks back, we were having our board meeting, and that is the point that came in, and we were also evaluating what was the efficiency 3 years back and where we are, and the numbers we were looking at that point we were always used to question our e-commerce whether we will be able to cross 50 orders per rider per day kind of a model, whether a rider can deliver more than 50 orders in a day. We just finished our big sale in October, and when we were looking at our efficiencies, there were riders who were doing 250, 280 orders in a day. And so that is something which is not something, of course, there is a technology that we have also been able to build, which has also been able to bring in the efficiency. But it's also coming largely also because of the demand density that is getting created. And that is something which we foresee. ONDC as a network that it brings in a larger set of buyers, sellers from different categories. And that density will for sure get created, which will for sure bring down the cost.
So just one quick point, the take rate or the rate which Amazon or a Flipkart charges to their sellers would be around 15 to 16%. In the ONDC platform, it's around 2 to 4%. Of course, they charge to fund their customer acquisition cost and so on and so forth. So of course, that's a saving, and that can obviously get passed on to the customer. 1. 2, the transparency that the network has to choose a seller, a buyer, a logistics player will ensure a competitive environment that will bring down principally the end cost for consumers.
One more, yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to take your views on the data sharing and privacy aspect of the platform and the network that you are creating, because essentially if there are so many buyers, sellers and customers, how do we ensure that the networks are sharing the data within each other or not sharing the data within each other? So how do we cater to that aspect of it?
Sarkan, obviously this one, but each participants in the network, a clear code is mentioned who can have what kind of data. Buyer apps will have buyer-centric data, seller app will have seller-centric data, and so on and so forth. Sharing of information is also, say for example, if there is a financing transaction which is required, then the seller app will have to sell the data, or not sell, but share the data with a bank or financial institution, and that will be done basis approval from the seller. Because if the seller needs finance, he or she will not have a problem in sharing the data. That's how it is. And always.
And maybe to add to that, see, fundamentally there is much less concentration of data in this kind of a network as opposed to a platform. First, as ONDC, we store no data, zero data, right? Nothing. We have nothing that's stored with us, right? As far as every one of the participants is concerned, they own their part of the data, right? A seller knows what he has sold, a buyer app knows what his buyers have bought, right? And obviously all of them are guided by the Data Protection Act, and clearly there is both legal as well as the network agreements with ONDC clearly enforce that. So we believe from a policy and from a regulation and also practices in these buyer and seller apps, it kind of ensures that there is privacy of data for both on the seller side as well as on the buyer side.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so for ONDC, I think that there are various different types of networks are kind of aggregated and come together to sell and buy. So two things need to be pinned down very clearly. One is, what about the dispute resolution? Because in case of Amazon or Flipkart, you have Amazon and the entire network is governed by whatever Amazon does. So in this case, it is just set of rules. Now, the big problem that we see, it is too good. I mean, looks like it is too good that perhaps it is not so practical at this moment. 2 points come into mind. That is how the dispute resolutions, because various stakeholders have various objectives and various incentivizations, number one. And number two, what are the business model? I mean, if the business model is not very pretty clearly identified for various people like buyers, sellers, and logistics supports. So this, you want to comment on that? Two things, dispute resolution, and they're connected, and the business model, clear business model of various people who are involved here.
Sure. So if you take, sorry.
Before you answer this question, can I ask you a connected question?
Yeah, please.
See, this whole system appears a bit too complex to me. The whole reason why we buy from Amazon is the convenience aspect. This is like totally, I don't think it will work. It's too complicated. The whole purpose of ECom is defeated. The ECom's genesis and the bedrock is convenience. Convenience of conversion, price discovery, single point accountability, easy returns, easy account keeping. This is what?
Okay, interesting point you raised. Let me draw an analogy on this, and I'm happy to discuss this in a little bit more detail, right? If you try to draw a picture of the internet today, right, how will it look like? Which system is connected to which system, right? A much neater diagram would have been if we put the internet as there's one big server in the world and everyone is connected to that server. That would be fantastic, right? On a slide, it will look so neat that there is one central server and everybody just talks to that server and you just follow what that server does. If you try to draw the internet on a chart, it will look like a spaghetti. Everyone is talking to everyone else, it's a complete mess, right? But all of us obviously use it every day, right? Because there is a protocol, there is a degree of trust, and there is the equivalent of dispute resolution and what happens when a packet fails, and etc., etc. All that is embedded in. Now, I'm not trivializing the question, right? The world of commerce with human beings is different from the world of technology with bits and bytes, no doubt, right? So I'm not trivializing the question. The way I see it is a challenge to be solved. It is not the alternative of saying that let's concentrate power in one central entity who will be the master of the universe and therefore sort out everything. That is not the route to go forward, right? From both angles, it will never lead to expansion of commerce to its fullest potential, and more importantly, it will lead in a direction of concentration of power, and we're already seeing that, right? If you take the examples of what's happening in the West, where after things have gone to a certain extent, people are trying to control back. So therefore, the alternative of concentration to get to 100% penetration is not the answer, right? Coming to your question on dispute resolution, I mean, there is a robust framework for dispute resolution which exists, right? And as was said by some of the panelists earlier, Once you get to a level of critical mass, it's not that everywhere there's going to be leakage and there's going to be disputes, etc. Right? Automatically, you will have trusted buyer applications. Automatically, you will have trusted seller applications. You as a buyer would go to a buyer app which you trust. That buyer app is incentivized to retain your trust. They will do whatever it takes to take single point ownership of every one of your disputes and sort it out. So it's not that, and today, currently our volumes are very small, right? If you look at where we are today as compared to the ambition, we are probably 1 or 2% of where we want to be. But if you look at there, are we having disputes today? No. Because there is enough framework in the system to make it happen. There will be operational issues, no doubt, right? You order something, it didn't come, it came 1 hour late, what happens? Those are operational issues which are there to be sorted out. But are they getting into major disputes where, a buyer app and seller app are getting into a thing? No, it doesn't happen that way, right? So we believe that fundamentally the network will play itself out in a manner which is right for the participants, and a model of saying let's concentrate everything into one place, that's not the answer, right? Even though it may look very elegant as a picture.
Thank you for the disruptive question and for the insightful answer to that, because I think it's a question that may have been on a lot of people's minds. And I think it really made sense to make that internet analogy in my head, because you're right, it looks like a mess, but it works because of the protocols and the way that it's evolved over time, right? So I think, thank you. Thanks to all the panelists again. I am getting stares from my team on the ground, so I think it's time. But yeah, we can continue some of these conversations with the crowd. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.